Okay. I think that's fine. And Shas Adam is Shas Adam. All right. We will go back a couple of lines so that we have some continuity. On page Memtes, the line starts, it's about a quarter from the top of the page, and it starts with the word Shiyiyeh Lefi Erkeinu. Everybody has Memtes? Yeah. Yossi, you have Memtes?
Yes, yeah.
All right, fine.
What was the סיכום of the last year before? כאילו, what we spoke.
Mm-hmm.
The moshel is the rochik from the nimshel.
It's a rocha from the Mishal, but it is accurate.
What?
It is distant from the Nimshal because it speaks about something completely different and completely different level. But it is accurate so that if you really understand the Moshel, you will come to understand the Nimshal.
So it's b'dei me,
Mm-hmm.
לא ב'dei me mamish. No kiru v'dat, no kiru.
Right.
That was everything that spoke.
Well, this is one of the principles that we spoke. The overall principle is the overall principle was that when you are mitzamtzem the seichel and you bring out only a very brief and very superficial exposition of the seichel, it is the way to teach. On the other hand, in that exposition is contained the whole seichel. And eventually the Talmud can get from that the whole thing, because it gets the principle. I'll give you an example of this, a Gashmistic example. In arithmetic, there is addition and multiplication. Addition is 2 plus 2. Multiplication is 2 times 2. Okay. Now, the end result of 2 times 2 and 2 plus 2 is identical. But they're two different concepts. It's much easier for a child to understand 2 plus 2 than to understand 2 times 2. Right? So if a teacher teaches a child 2 times 2, and he says, you know what 2 times 2 is? 2 times 2 is like 2 plus 2. Then he didn't teach him anything. He didn't even teach him the basic concept. Even though 2 times 2 is a very simple illustration of times, of multiplication, but if he teaches him this simple principle, from this he can develop to a much more complex principle. And from 2 times 2 he can develop an understanding of 2 divided by 2, of division. Because division is the opposite of multiplication. But if he does not go to understand, to explain to him the multiplication concept, he only helps him to get the result, which is 2 plus 2, then he is depriving, he's not teaching him anything. He's depriving him from the principle, and he's not giving him anything that he's really trying to teach him. So in order to teach simple arithmetic, you have to give very simple illustrations, but you have to stick to the point. You have to insist that he understands 2 times 2. This is the pshat that you are minimizing, you are metzamtzem the seichel, but you are giving him an accurate exposition of the seichel. So that from this he can eventually understand the whole concept. Okay. You understand, Yossi? Yeah. All right, so we will start just about a quarter from the top of the page. Memtes, and line starts, Sheyiya lefi arkeinu. So the Rebbe is explaining that the Mishnah, the Mishnayos that Rabbeinu HaKodesh taught, it is a very brief expression of the halacha. And this brief expression of the halacha is the result of very involved and great discussions. This is just the end result. And the end result was all condensed in the words of the Mishnah. And the reason it was condensed in order that it should be presented to us in the way that we should be able to understand. Omnom be'emes, yet the truth is that yesh beloshen ha-mishnah, that in the very expression of the Mishnah is contained kol oimek oirech v'reichav, all the depth, and oirech v'reichav, the length and breadth. In other words, the entire discussion and all the insights and all this what is pnimius v'yasmius chochmosa, the very depth and the very essence of their chochmah. Ukmei shebegemara, and this depth of their chochmah is presented later on in the Gemara. But in the Gemara, Mavuar Achar Kach, it's explained afterwards, Prote Loshen HaMishnah, Ba'oimek Oirech V'Reicha. Where the Gemara is very carefully weighing every word of the Mishnah, and all the expressions in the Mishnah are then explained with a full view of their depth and width. But in the Mishnah it's brief, it's concealed, you don't see it. But I gave you the example of Shnaim Oichazim Betalis. Two people are holding to a talis. So this is a simple exposition, but every word is very, very accurately presented, and it has to be explained. Why does it say Oichazim? Why doesn't it say two people are arguing about a talis, and the talis is sitting someplace else? I think they're holding. And the answer is that this halacha is precisely applicable only in this exact case when they're holding. And if they're not holding, then it's a completely different halacha. If the talis is lying in the street, completely different halacha. Or it's lying in the shul on the table, this one says it's mine, this one says it's mine, a completely different halacha. That you don't see in the Mishnah superficially. But the Mishnah presents it in simple words, but in these words is contained the entire insight. K'moi kein, and the same is true, hu behashpoas haseichel, this is a similar thing is true behashpoas haseichel. When one is mashpia seichel, sheha mashpia, where the mashpia is malim behashefa, he conceals within this shefa, within the expression of the seichel that he is giving, he is concealing it. That's mean concealing means he is putting into it, but it's contained in a contained manner that you don't directly see. Kol oimek chochmosoi, the full depth of his chochmah. Because if he's not giving him the full depth of his chochmah, he's not mashpia. He's not mashpia anything. He has to give him the full depth of his chochmah. Elo shehu nela meham kabel, except that the Makabel does not offhand, right away, see the depth of his chokhmah. But this part that is meir begilui, that comes forth revealed, uchitzenius haseichel, masha lefi erke. It's only the chitzonius of the seichel, the external part of the seichel, the appearance of the seichel, that which is lefi erkoi, that which is according to the measurements, the level of the makabel, that he is able to relate to it. But within that is contained the entire depth and width of the seichel. All right. This ability that the mashpia has, let some say to constrict, ulahalim etzem sichloi kanal, and to conceal the essence of his seichel, as we explained. Where does he have this ability to express the seichel and yet conceal the essence of it? Hu mikoyach ha'hagbolo sheyesh bekoyach ha'maskil sholoi. This is also a seichel. It takes special wisdom, insight, to understand how to limit the seichel. And that ability also comes from Koyach HaMaskil. Just like the ability to understand is from the Koyach HaMaskil, the ability to focus in and limit the expression is also from the Koyach HaMaskil. Son?
What says the Gemara Bari in Mishnah Tzir? Because Gemara is Megaled the Moimek, better than the Mishnah.
Yeah. I would like to suggest to Yossi that you have to stay focused and concentrated on what is being said here, because if you fly off to something else that you learned a similar thing, it will distract you, it will take you away from being able to understand what is being explained here. This is a difficult concept to understand, and I'd like you to try to understand what the Rebbe is saying. Normally we think that the ability to explain the Seichel, the ability of Seichel to understand the Seichel is from Koyach HaMaskil, which is a Chochem. But then, that he is able to limit it, that's limiting the Seichel. That's not Seichel. The Rebbe says that's not the case, Yossi.
Yeah.
That the ability to limit the Seichel comes from the same source as the ability to understand the Seichel. This is a phenomenal thought. Yeah, you have a question?
I'm trying to understand in the same time I'm trying to do it. But if I want to bring the message needs to be sent. So the message that you're going to bring to the person, that's the message that he's going to get. Behind it, there's a very, again, it's deeper and it's, but the bottom line, what do I want to tell to the person? The way it is in Chitzonius or the way it is in Pnimius? And so the question is, if I want him to know about the story about little kids that went to school, if that's the message, that's what he's going to get. But if the message is much deeper, and I want him to get a deeper message, so is from that going to get a deeper message from that, or
It will open him up first to understand this, and through this he'll be able to get to the deeper message.
But first of all, whatever he's going to get, that's what he's going to see. He's not going to see a deeper thing.
Correct. But in that will be contained the whole message, the depth of it.
But if his sechel is not in the level of the mashpia, how is it going to come from down here to up there? From up there down here, it's understandable.
No. From up there down here is
even
more difficult to understand than from down here to up here. He will come from down up because first he will understand the first concept. Like, for instance, let's take the Ashnai Moshes in Betalis that we discussed. You don't know the Gemara. The Mishnah says two people are holding to a talus, and each one is claiming that it is mine. And the Gemara says, and they claim that I found it. This principle that I found it is actually possible that they both found it together. Right? We don't know. Maybe they found it together, they got hold of it together. So the Mishnah says that they have to swear that they each possess not less than half, and they divide the garment. They sell the garment and divide the money, whatever it is. Okay? So, once that this halacha is taught, that you go and you swear this, and you divide the garment. Then, after you learn it, you go to and examine with the Talmud, you examine, okay, what does this halacha say? If you are taking garment that two people are arguing about, and you're going to divide it, What does that mean? That means that the person to whom it really belongs, will lose it forever. How can the Beis Din do that? It belongs either to this one or to that one. So he will lose it forever. How can you divide it? So then you come back and you explain to him, the reason we can divide it is that since they're both holding them, that holding makes it belongs to them, to both of them. The holding itself makes it theirs, because the rule is that that which a person holds belongs to him. He that they're both holding, so it belongs to both of them. Except that, since that there's an argument, so then each one has to explain on what basis it is his. The other one says it's mine. So you have to explain on what basis. How did it become yours? Oh, I found it and I picked it up. But you're dividing it not on the basis of what they're saying. Why are you dividing it? On the basis of the fact that they are holding it. Because that makes it theirs. You understand? So this is a completely different insight into this halacha that you cannot present it to the Talmud on first glance. First you present the halacha, and after he knows the halacha, you start examining the halacha and asking questions. You understand? And through these questions you get to understand the full impact of this halacha and all the nuances with which it was presented. And this opens up the Talmud to a much broader understanding. And that is that when it comes to a rov, to a Beis Din, the Beis Din has to adjudicate, has to paskin, judge, has to paskin the halacha according to what the situation is. The Beis Din can decide, I think it's yours. I think it's yours. It has to be something very fundamental, very basic. And they paskin on the basis of what the situation is. They're holding it, therefore the Beis Din, something that I'm holding, no one can come and take away from me. It's mine, because I'm holding it. So the Beis Din cannot play around with that. That's a fact. So this gives the Talmud a broader understanding of what the power and the function and the duty of a Rav or a Beis Din is. To understand the situation very, very thoroughly and understand all the details of the situation that have an effect on the argument and the paskin according to this. This is where all the chokhmah is hidden. If someone did not know that holding has an impact on the halacha, and he would think, and that's what a child would think, that what is the biggest impact on the halacha? What he's claiming, it's mine. He's screaming, it's mine. That's not the way the halacha works. In the halacha, what he is claiming is of secondary power. The main power is the fact that he's holding. And the reason for that is because the person cannot mix into the actual affair. They have to pass to what the situation is. You understand? The situation is that they're holding, so that's what the person has to pass.
There's another question.
The person doesn't. They have no right to come and divide things. They adjudicate the situation as it is. Yossi, you with me? Huh?
There's another question where they say, Shnaim of Hazim B'Talit. In the beginning, it's like they tell you that it's like the Tefillah Shnaim of Hazin, it's like it belongs actually to both of them. That's also strange.
What?
Shnaim of Hazin, it's like it tells you that they both own it somehow.
Well, that's what I'm explaining. But you don't see it right away. First you say, okay, this is what you pass. And then you come to understand the depth of this whole halach. And you come to understand from this also the depth of what is the function of a robe, of a bezel. You understand? The bezel don't just pass, you take it. They only adjudicate the situation. And what rights a person has based on the situation. It's completely different halach. Okay? You with us, Yossi? So the big thing over here to understand, and this is the important message in the entire discussion, this last line that we just now read, that this ability by the mashpia to be able to constrict the seichel and to conceal the etzem seichel and to present it in a very superficial exposition, this is a koyach that comes from the koyach hamaski, from the same koyach hamaski. And what is there? Let's try to understand this a little bit. Yossi. Let's understand this a little bit. I'll use an illustration to understand this from halacha, but in a different field. In a field when the Rambam says that the inyan of emunah is to know, the first principle is to know that everything that exists comes from Hashem. Everything that exists comes from Hashem. Hashem created everything. Then the Rambam says, Yossi, with me? Huh? That one of the principles with which you understand this is that miyamitas himotzoi nimtzu kol hanimtzoi. That from the truth of His presence, everything else comes to be. Okay. So the deeper and the broader message is that Hashem is Motzei Rishon. This is the first being, and everything depends on Him. Everything comes from Him. He's the first being. Without this first being, there cannot be any other being. That's what Rambam expresses also. In this second expression, Yamitas Himotzei Nimtzu Kol HaNimtzoim, there is contained a different message. And the message there is that every individual piece of existence of the world that you're looking at, it is actually representative of Hashem's presence. They're not two separate things. If this thing exists, that is because there is the Hashem's presence in it. This is what makes it present. Amit is imotzi. So this is focusing in. When you say first that Hashem is everything and is everywhere, this is a broad thought. This is mitzamtzem the thought and saying wide, rachav. This is what something this is saying. This one particular thing, this comes from Hashem. So, to be able to focus in, to be able to focus in and say that this truth that Hashem creates everything can all be concentrated on the saying one statement, that this is from Hashem's presence. This itself is the power of Kei HaMaskil. Even though this is a very small issue, talking about this particular item, I'm not talking about everything. Talking about a particular item. Or we're saying, Hashgacha Protis, Hashem made this happen, brought both things together. So we're talking about a very narrow point. But to be able to bring out and explain how this small point has an aspect of truth in it, for this you need a tremendous power of concentration. And it also comes from the Koyach HaMaskil. Koyach HaMaskil is not only that which tells you that everything is Hashem, but Koyach HaMaskil also tells you that this particular thing is from Hashem. So when you teach a child about Hashem, you're not going to teach a child that Hashem created the whole world. Doesn't know what the whole world is about. But you teach a child that the fruit that he is eating, Hashem created, and has to make a bracha to eat it. That is from the Koyach HaMaskil. Okay.
Just an idea. So basically, a message will have to be sent out. So just to let the person know the message. I mean, the essence of the view, you cannot know. The essence of where the message got from, okay, of the source. I mean the source itself, you cannot know.
You cannot express it.
Yeah, only the message, the way he had to accept it. So what does he have to see deeper than that, than the message? What does he have to see?
Who, the Makabel?
Yeah, does he have to see it
Ultimately,
through the message, or just the message, or the
no,
source of the message?
No.
You know what I mean?
That's only the beginning. That's only the first step. But ultimately, he has to be able to develop the whole seichel, what the mashpia has.
You have to develop the seichel of the mashpia?
Sure. I mean, when you teach a child, you want him to be a child all his life? Or you want him to grow up?
What if the mashpia is Hashem? Hashem is the mashpia.
Wait. I don't know that question. I don't know. That's off track completely. Mashpia Mekabel means two human beings. A person is teaching another person. So when you're teaching a child, and you want the child to grow up and understand everything, all that's what implied and contained in this seichel. If you mashpia is the Hashem, I don't know how to deal with that.
No, I mean the Torah is the Chokhmah of the Hashem, right? The Torah is the Chokhmah of Hashem.
That's right. There is Chokhmah Hashem.
We have
But it was very much Mitzum Samson. Then afterwards came Teresh B'Al Peh, and the Teresh B'Al Peh is expressed on the level of human seichel.
And from that, we have to understand a deeper the source.
From that, in the Torah, we have everything, and we can learn deeper and deeper and deeper to understand more and more of Chochmas Hashem. Yeah. Okay, but this is the important message, that the koyach to be mitzamtzim the seichel is also comes from the koyach hamaski. Vehine. Okay. In other words, that same koyach that makes it possible for the mashpia to understand the seichel to begin with, that same koyach is the one that is able to identify and be magbul the seichel and to put it into a small exposition. Hine kol tzimtzum vehelem hanal. This entire tzimtzum, this entire narrowing down of the seichel, and the concealing of the essential insight, and presenting it only on the external level. Hu rak legabe hamakabe. This narrowing of the seichel and concealment affects only the makabe. That the makabe only sees the chitzonius and the narrow seichel. But v'loy legabe hamashpiyah. This narrowing and the concealment does not have any effect to the mashpiyah himself. What does that mean to say? Shaharei, it means the following. Since that gabe hamashpiyah, since that by the mashpiyah, from the viewpoint of the mashpiyah, meir begilui, there by the mashpiyah, that shines through openly, kol oimek sichloi v'chochmosei, the entire depth of his seichel and his wisdom, be'aseichel ha'metzumtzum, in this narrow seichel, k'mei shehoyo koidem shenisamtzim, the way the seichel was before it was narrowed down. He narrowed it down in order to present it to the makaber. But he, in this narrower seichel, he sees the whole principle, the original concept of the seichel. Before it was nisamtzim. V'gam beham masholim, and even in the masholim, and we said before that a moshol is something which is extraneous to the seichel, something which is completely distant, strange to the seichel. But even in the masholim, harei hu roye kol eimek ha-seichel, the mashpia can actually see the entire depth of the seichel. Hainu, what we mean to say here is that loy zu levad, that not only is it true shebahaseichel ha-metzumtzum, that in the narrow seichel meir etzloi kol eimek ha-seichel, by him he sees in the narrow seichel the entire richness. Meir means entire richness of the seichel, but even more elo, but even more than that. Shagam behamasholi, that even in the moshol, harei horoye kol protei hanimshol. Even in the moshol, he can see and recognize all the aspects of the nimshal, kmei shehu etzloi, the way the nimshal is within his own mind. Shehoyo mufshot, when this nimshal was completely removed, mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'hela, when the nimshal was completely removed from any garment and any narrowing down and any helam and any concealment. All right. Here we have the kind of being exposed to some kind of an essence of seichel. An essence of seichel. He said the nimshal is mufshot. Mufshot means what? undressed, undefined, essentially. I want to go back to an aspect of exposing the concept of seichel that we spoke in the past. In general, the whole concept of seichel. We normally think of seichel, and I just want to clear this up. We normally think of seichel as a means to understand a certain situation. It's like a tool. How much is this? Oh, let me calculate. I'll tell you how much it is. But we have to understand that this is only the very chitzonic aspect of seichel. This is called actually seichel baham. Even a behemoth understands, can be related to that seichel, because this is a seichel that actually deals with gashmizdike entities, with gashmizdike objects. You want to figure out how to set up these tables. Okay, you need seichel, but you're moving around gashmizdike tables. It's not a concept. The tables exist. You try it one way, you try it another way, and that's it. That's the whole seichel. Seichel, the real essence of seichel, when we come to this term of saying that seichel is mufshat mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'helen, clearly we're talking about a different level of seichel, a different aspect of seichel. What kind of seichel is it if it's mufshat mikol levush? What kind of seichel is it that has no levush, he has no words? Is that a seichel? What do we think of seichel? Seichel is something, logical expression of something. If it's logical expression, it has automatically a levush. You see with me? Huh? Here we're talking about the seichel that is mufshat mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'helen. What type of seichel is this? The answer is clearly, we are talking about the seichel, not the way we understand the seichel in our conscious exposition, conscious thinking. In other words, we figure things out. This is the essential seichel that a human being has because he is a human being. Something that makes sense to him because of some special quality that he has. This is where the seichel can be mufshot, mikol levush, v'tzimtzum v'helen. What is that mufshot? Yossi, you with me a little bit? I'd like you to try to understand this, okay? I'm going just to understand the term mufshat. Mufshat we call the wush with tzimtzum v'helen. Take a moshel from completely different area, like we talk about over here, a moshel from different field. You eat. You take an apple and you eat. The apple, at the time when you were eating it is something totally separate from you. Right? It didn't come from you, it came from a tree. Now, if this apple should remain separate from you, it goes through your intestines and everything, but it remains a separate entity, then your eating it has no value. Doesn't do anything. On the contrary, it stops up your belly and you have a bellyache. It's nothing. What is the function of eating an apple? You with me, Yossi? The function of eating an apple is that you have to eat it. You chew it up very fine, and then it goes into a bodily process. The bodily process further breaks it up into components, and then subcomponents, and then sub-subcomponents, until it becomes so refined that you cannot distinguish between the apple and the person. You cannot distinguish between the apple and the blood and that which is part of the person himself. It becomes so refined. At that time, it unites with the person. It goes right into the person's bloodstream and right into the person's flesh and unites with the entire process of the human being. It becomes part of him. That's what's called dam bosor mipsori. It becomes dam bosor of his own flesh and blood. That part of the food that cannot be so processed, Tankia has to be thrown out. That cannot remain in the person. That's refuse and has to be thrown out. And if it doesn't come out, then it becomes poisonous. The same apple that gave him life can poison him. It has to be thrown out. So when is it able to feed the person? Really, when it becomes completely part of him, not as a separate thing, not distinguishable. It is part of him. At that time, when it becomes part of him and it's indistinguishable from him, then we could say that the apple now is mufshot mikol lavush. It has no lavush. It doesn't have its own identity within the body of the person. It's indistinguishable between the body of the person and the apple. It has no lavush. At that time, when it becomes mufshot, that's when it becomes part of the person. Did you understand that, right? So therefore, let's translate this into the words here. The seichel that's mufshot mikol lavush. What does that mean? I'm sorry? It means that the seichel is something that is part of the person. That's something that he learned. That's separate from him. It's part of the person, just like the food is part of the person. So this is a completely different seichel than when we talk about how do you set up a table, which is always external. This is a completely different part of the person. This is the person himself. In other words, this seichel unites, is one with the person. And this is why we say that only a human being has seichel. Lahavno, animals don't have seichel. Even though animals can be smart in certain ways, they can find their way around, but that's not, they can find their way around only in the Gashmizdiki things, external things. But to have seichel, to have concept that is expressing some kind of an essential truth about himself, doesn't have. That's only the human being. Because a human being really has the ability, not only the ability, but this is what defines a human being, that he can identify things from the perspective of how they are supposed to be, what the truth is. This is a seichel that grows and comes out from the human neshama, from the human truth. Because this is what we say all the time, that the seichel comes from that which is higher than seichel, from the neshama, and from the ot rotzim and oinek, and then it comes into koyach. Then there is a koyach maskil, and the koyach maskil creates seichel. And the way this seichel is coming from the koyach maskil, it's coming from his koyach maskil. So at that time the seichel does not have levushim, because the seichel then is reflective, and so reflective of his essence. This is the way the yin is. Just like the food is reflective, is one with his blood and flesh. This is why it says that there is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And Beis Shammai understand things in a certain way. Beis Hillel understand things in a certain way. And they always have a lot of different opinions. Why? Because their essence was different. Beis Shammai was from Midas HaGvura, Beis Hillel from Midas HaChesed. And the seichel reflected of who they were. Seichel was not an external calculation. Seichel reflected their nefesh. So even though by the time Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are expressed in a Mishnah, they're expressed in a very external manner, in a levush and tzimtzum and helem, but the source of this difference is something which is mufshot from levush and tzimtzum and helem. It came from their essence. You with me?
So everything what the Mashpia say, he said like it should be from his essence, like so refined.
That's right. This is the point which I was trying to explain to you a couple of lessons ago. That the new Mashpia or Makabel is not just I know something and I'm telling you. Mashpia means it's Mashpia his seichel, something that he has actually revealed from his nefesh, from his koyach hamaskil.
And he's supposed to understand the essence of the message or the essence of the person?
Who, the Makabel?
The Makabel.
The Makabel has to understand the essence of the message.
But not the essence of the person. Of the chokmah of the person of God.
He has to understand the essence of the message. But in this message is contained the essence of his chokmah. And the real end, purpose of this whole teaching is that he should understand the essence of his chokmah. At first he understands the message, and then through that he goes to understand the essence of his chokmah. This is why the Gemara says, Ad arboin shmin lekoimin shadaita derabe. That till 40 years, a person does not really understand what his Rebbe taught him. Because he understands everything, he knows everything, but he doesn't really understand the Seichel Olam. Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Yidden at the end of 40 years in the desert, and he said, for 40 years you were in the desert, and now first you're beginning to wake up and to understand what happened over here. What really happened. You experienced everything. You saw the man, you saw the be'er, you saw all the miracles, everything. But really the depth of what you experience, you're first beginning now to realize. This is what happens. When you come to the essence of what happens, where it is not coming through a lavush, to a tzimtzum, to a lavush, and tzimtzum and hela. But the essence of a person is. I'll give you an exposition, an idea, right? A baby is born. The baby goes to cheder, goes to school. What is the purpose? What is a baby? A child? He goes to yeshiva, he's going to learn all of this. Then he goes to higher grades and he learns Gemara and he becomes a Rav. What's a baby? What's a child? He knows how to learn, he knows how to pass the child. Then, Hashem's help, he grows up, he gets married, he raises a family, and he has a community. He says, what's a person? A person is, he accomplishes these and these things. But at some point in time, you wake up and take a look, and you see that a person is not really a person. It's a whole world. It's a whole world. Not an individual person.
What do you mean the person is whole world?
Is a whole world. Is a whole world. A person is a whole world. It's not what he accomplishes, what he is able to do. This person represents a whole world. The family grows, and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It's an infinite presence. It's a whole world. And if somebody is a teacher, he has students, and then the students have children, and this goes also indefinite. And it's all from his influence. It's not just what I'm able to do. It's a reality. It's a godly reality. But you don't realize it when it's happening. When it's happening, you say, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to go here, I have to go here, I have to work, I have to pay bills. No, it's all the various things that you do. But when do you realize the reality? That's mufshet mikol lavush with tzimtzum v'hela. The real meaning of life, not you first see much later. But the real chacham, the Torah sees in a baby the whole reality. Kol hamkayim nefesh achas mi Yisrael, ki elikim oyel molech. I have to translate. You know what it said? Ki oyel molech is one child. We don't know what a child is. It's oyel molech. So the point to understand that real seichel is that which is mufshot mikol lavush v'tzimtzum v'hela. This is the way the mashpia understands it to himself, not because he explained it to himself, but because he understands it this way.
The mashpia really understand the child, the whole world.
Right. I'm saying whatever the seichel is that he explains. This is a reality in the mashpia. This is not like two separate things. It's like an apple in your mouth. Something that dissolved, and it's mufshut mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'helam. And it's the entire truth of his neshama he sees in this seichel. And this seichel to him, to the mashpia, is as true as his own neshama. It's not something that is true because he has proofs, but it's just the reality itself, the truth of his seichel. That this is what the mashpia sees and recognizes in the very narrow and small presentation that he gives to the Talmud. Like we said in Moshel, that when a person goes into a hall and he sees a chasana and he sees tables and chairs and he sees settings, really what he sees is a simcha. This is an exposition of what a human being is, what human seichel is. This expresses the entire concept of seichel, even though it's in a narrow and a small exposition. But this is the real concept of seichel. So let's just take a look over here, right? B'hamsholim harei hu roya, the last line. Harei hu roya kol prote hanimshol. In the misholim, he sees all the aspects of the nimshol. K'moi shehu etzloi, the way it is by him. Ki shehoya, when this nimshol was first conceived, mufshot mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'helam. When the nimshol was completely devoid, removed from any garment or any limit or helam or concealment. It's just the way it expressed itself from his own seichel, the reality of the seichel itself. Okay? So this is it for this time.